Good evening, or perhaps afternoon. It's afternoon now. It'll be evening when we're done. This is one of those odd times where we have to figure out what the greeting is. I'm Matt Jacobs. I'm director of the Bob Graham Center for Public Service. It's great to have you all here, whether physically in Pugh Hall or virtually joining us. Before we get started, as always, I need to thank the team, but specifically for this event, I need to thank Becca Burton, who's hiding around the corner there, and Radhika Subramanian. Becca is our Gulf Scholars Program Coordinator, and Gulf Scholars I'll talk about in just a second. And Radhika is one of our student assistants who works specifically on Gulf Scholars, and they've been critical to putting this event together for us today. The Gulf Scholars Initiative, if you're not aware of it, is funded by criminal settlement monies from the BP Horizon oil spill back in 2010. Bob Graham was a co-chair of the National Commission for that investigated it. Those settlement monies are used for grants from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. We're fortunate to have a $525,000 Gulf Scholars Grant, augmented by $413,000 from the UF Presidential Strategic Funding Initiative to support efforts to connect especially undergraduates with Florida's Gulf communities to try to promote communities that are sustainable, not just in the environmental sense, but also in the cultural, economic, political, social sense, et cetera. And hopefully by getting students to engage in those communities as students, maybe through internships, through research, through coursework, et cetera, and then helping them engage after they graduate by potentially going back to those communities, again, to promote that long-term sustainability. We also, I'll mention as an aside, here on campus have another program funded by those same settlement monies, a Gulf Design Studio in the College of Design, Construction, and Planning that's focused on graduate students. Jeff Carney in the Florida Institute for the Built Environment Resilience is the head of that project. So it's great that we have those opportunities here on campus focused on the Gulf. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to note one thing about our speaker series title, Our Gulf, Our Future. That was developed over a year ago. It is not intended to be sort of nationally possessive. It is more intended to be communally shared. And so the idea here, again, thinking through that notion of communal sustainability. And when we think about Gulf communities, we also need to think about them beyond those existing on the Gulf. We need to think about all Florida communities as Gulf communities. At least the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration defines all Florida communities as Gulf communities. We also need to think a little more broadly about Gulf communities. Asheville, North Carolina did not think of itself as a Gulf community before October of 2024. It sure does now, right? And obviously to great detriment of many in that community. And that's just one example of ways that we need to think creatively about what it means to focus on the Gulf and the challenges in the future of a sustainable Gulf. To help us think through that is Dr. Galen Treuer. Galen leads the Climate Tech and Economic Innovation for Miami-Dade County. He works with Mayor, the Chief of Innovation and Economic Development, Chief Resilience Officer, and the private sector to pursue the county's climate resilience goals and catalyze regional investment in climate technology by bringing together a network of entrepreneurs, investors, businesses, academics, and community leaders. He is on the leadership team for the ClimateReady Tech Hub, designated and funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration in 2024, and serves on the Department of the Interior's Climate Adaptation Science Advisory Council. Dr. Treuer has worked to instigate just climate solutions and policy for over a decade and holds a PhD in environmental science and policy from the University of Miami and a BA in economics from Oberlin College. It's our pleasure to welcome Dr. Galen Treuer. Thank you.
This mic or that? I'm going to take this one. All right, I'm just going to... welcome you all. Hello. It's a real pleasure, and thank you so much. I really enjoyed that intro. It feels really appropriate to who I am, and I think that in this moment is really important. And I'll be honest, I changed my presentation in response to the situation that we're in right now, right? Like, I think that my work is changing. All of our work is changing, just as the weather is changing. And I want to start with this question. How do we build a positive vision for the future of our golf, right? That's the response to this prompt. And that question is, I think, the right one for me because I've been working in climate for 15 years. And it's felt a bit like we are the doomsayers. And it's pretty difficult. So I'm going to talk through this, and I'm going to have a conversation that essentially wraps my general talk about the Tech Hub. So I'll give you the Tech Hub talk. We'll do that in like 10 minutes or less. And if you guys have questions about the Tech Hub, I'm happy to answer those, and I can go very in depth. But I'm going to wrap it in some thoughts that I'm having about the Gulf and the region and our work right now as people who see the climate changing, and some of us have gathered a ton of information about that, and we do have some concerns. But I think there is a lot of positivity. But let's start here. Why are we here? This is a question I was asking. Why am I here at UF right now? It is because of this tragedy that happened. And if you did not experience it, it was a tragedy. And the climate folks at the time thought this is a moment, and it was a funding opportunity as well. And I think as we go forward, we should remember, this is something I've learned from psychologists and spiritual leaders, that we become what we most deeply, frequently, and most powerfully ask questions about. So what was the question that we asked after this event? We asked a ton of questions. We asked a ton of science questions. That funding opportunity funded science. It funded us being here right now. It continues to fund things. There's so much money in fossil fuels and in energy, right? And it's because it runs our economy. And even a small chunk of it was tough for BP, but that company is still here, and they have just pivoted away from renewables back to fossil fuel. That I just saw that announcement today. And that's a reality of them as a business, right? And it's a challenge. But it has funded a lot of new knowledge about the region. We know a lot more than we did 15 years ago. And another reason that we're here is because I grew up in Duluth. Duluth is a beautiful city on the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. It doesn't have the most water, but it is a massive lake, like 500 miles long lake. And I grew up in Duluth, which is a kind of post-industrial, well, still industrial, but Rust Belt city. And it is home to one of the original, very first ever Superfund sites. So it was one of those super polluted places in 1979 where they were like, well, things are not looking good for the St. Louis Bay estuary. And I just bought a house, and the guy who sold that house to me from Duluth, he talked about fishing in the bay in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, and pulling out fish that were walleye, but you can only tell because of the eye, because they had so many boils and things on them. They were certainly not eating those. People are eating out of the bay now. Superfund has worked somewhat, but this site is still there. No industry is on top of it. No work is on top of it. No one's living there. It is a very long haul thing, cleaning this stuff up. But that got me, that's why I'm here. I grew up in a place that was polluted and beautiful. And there is the possibility of fixing things and doing a good job. And Duluth is like a gorgeous place. You should come and visit. You can go mountain biking. They have 70 miles of mountain bike trails. But I moved on from there. And when the Horizon oil spill happened, I was working at Columbia on the at the Center for Research on Environmental Decisions. And we had just put out this book, The Psychology of Climate Change Communication, that was like, this is how you talk to people about climate change. And I remember we took this book and we're like, okay, what does it mean? This is Deepwater Horizon. It has just been a focusing point. How do we translate all of the emissions that are boiling out of the ocean right now into action? And we're like, do you say it's a balloon the size of Texas? Do you say, like, we tried all of this stuff, and a lot of it is grounded in psychology and this idea that losses loom larger than gains, but also complicated by the fact that when something's abstract or far away, you're more comfortable looking at it. The closer it gets to you, the less comfortable you are approaching it. You may try and avoid, like, especially if it's a risky and dangerous thing. And so that's one of the complications of climate change and of climate work and environmental work. But at the time, we were seeing a lot of pictures of polar bears. I've never seen a polar bear in the wild, right? So it's very far from me. It's approachable, but also it's pretty abstract. And we were finding that actually doesn't work. It doesn't motivate action. It motivates attention. And there's some great work that came out of Yale that classified different types of people around climate change. They're still doing this work. And I think this is excellent work. It was excellent work about 10 years ago. And it put us into different groups and said, you know what, you can target them. This is kind of classic marketing work. And it was effective, but things have changed, right? These groups may still exist, but the issues and the situation has changed. This is Noemi Oreskes. She's a historian. And she found out that a reason why we haven't been that effective on climate. She found that looking through history at the spending of the fossil fuel lobby industry, that they had been seeding doubt into the community. And when you do that, a lot of these people who are concerned, cautious, disengaged, or doubtful move towards doubt and inaction. And it worked really well. It worked very well. And we haven't taken as much action as we probably need to if we want to live in a world that's not 2.5 degrees hotter. That's kind of my guess. So this is, you guys know what this is? This is from the IPCC, and it is a projection of different scenarios of sea level rise under different emissions categories. So if you look at those different numbers, those are different temperatures, essentially. The SSP 8.5, like there's a big range that we could be in. And this is what we would call deep uncertainty, and this is supposed to guide you in what you should do. And it's saying two things. One, reduce your emissions, and two, you're going to see more sea level rise, and that's going to be riskier. It's a little complicated graph. This is a different one that shows just projections, and this is from the state of Florida. This is on a state of Florida website about sea level rise. And so it is the guidance from the state of Florida, one of them, for how we should handle sea level rise. And it shows these different scenarios and kind of uncertainty bounds in different colors. And my question for you is, does this give you a positive vision for what to do with the changing world? It doesn't for me, and it doesn't for the people that I have been working with. It's very helpful for planning in an abstract way. And that was super important to make sure that you guys are all thinking about the same world. So we could choose one of these. And I think now, as we see where emissions are going, we can choose one of these. Probably not going to head to the really high one. The smartest people I know are saying we're going somewhere more in the middle, right? So you could say intermediate. We're probably headed there. And that can give you some guidance. Another way to look at it is another resource from UF and 1,000 Friends of Florida is like, well, wait, land use is important. It's not just sea level rise. Like, what happens to the land? What do? They did a number of studies, and this is a map. Honestly, I still find this pretty abstract. Where am I in this? What am I doing? In the reality of the world, this is what's happening with sea level rise, right? This is, I think this is from Hurricane Helene. This is storm surge around Tampa as they prepare for the next storm to come this last year, right? This is what sea level rise looks like because those storm surges were higher than they would have been otherwise. And that means that they go blocks further in. And that's where we're at. This is happening. Okay? It's not, and that's, I think, how we have to communicate with ourselves and with others, because those abstractions are very useful tools and they're necessary tools, but they do not get to the action on the ground or to the story that matters or get us to the technologies, which I'm going to talk about, that we need. Which technologies would actually help us here? And what we really need are the technologies that reduce the costs and reduce the risk. Because what we know, that curve is going up. It is not going to stay the same. We're in a place where we're not curbing emissions. Our policy at a federal level is not to curb emissions in the way that we had said that we were going to. And that means that we're going to pay this cost. And it's not even. It does not happen evenly across the country. Some will have to pay more. And they'll pay with money, and they'll pay with disruptive lives. They will pay with their lives as well. And you're going to pay a lot for infrastructure that gets destroyed. That was never designed to deal with that sea level, or with those winds, or with those rainfalls, or with the fires. And that gets to what I've been doing professionally in Miami-Dade County. I was planning, right? Like I got into the county and I did strategic planning when we wrote a climate action strategy that said, here are a bunch of steps we could take, and they will help us reduce emissions. And those pair with our adaptation strategies for sea level rise, and our strategies to help protect the bay, and a number of other actions, including getting housing for people. These all work together. And I did that about 2 years in. I said, I want to do something that's more about implementation. This planning is good, but I feel like I want to do action. And I was fortunate enough to be taken and put into a new role leading climate and economic innovation, working with the private sector, that role that I've been doing. And in it, we pulled together a group of people to respond to a federal call for a tech hub. And the tech hubs come out of the CHIPS Act, which was an act to ostensibly get us in competition globally, at the head of competition globally for chips, right? Chips manufacturing. But they did make this call that said, regions, come to us and tell us what technology you want to be the global leader in. And we internally, across our region in South Florida, had meetings, and there were a number of technologies that wanted to go, including health tech. That's a much bigger economic sector in South Florida. It's a very big sector. And they wanted to compete, but we had McKinsey come in and do an analysis, and they said, you guys are probably 11th or 12th in health. But in climate, you compete. And so we did. We competed very hard. We got over 70 partners together, which I'll show you here, and we won. We were one of 31 that were designated, and then we were one of the original 12 that were funded. And it was not for political reasons. Some had more political clout because they had senators who were really fighting for it. Our senators, we did get a letter from Marco Rubio, which I really appreciate. We had bipartisan support for this, and I think we still do have really good bipartisan support, but they weren't on the right committees to nudge. We won this on our merits, right? We won this tech hub, which is cool. We got $20 million. And what are we doing? I say this is for the people, is for property, and it's for the planet. We're working across South Florida to commercialize solutions for our changing relationship to water and extreme weather. And what do we get out of it? We get good jobs, we get a resilient economy, and we have stronger national security. This is critical for Department of Defense. It's critical for supply chains, right? It's critical for all of the things that move goods around, right? You need to make sure that our infrastructure works. And we're doing it with all these partners. This is a ton, I know. You don't have to read all of them, but you can see we have all the major research universities. We have the HBCUs. We have the community colleges. We even have University of Florida. Even though they're outside our region, we still brought University of Florida in because you guys have assets we do not, including testing beds in the Gulf. We don't have access to that. None of our universities have assets in the Gulf, and it's critical if we're going to have a market that we have access to the Gulf to prove, because the water's different, the waves are different, things are different, and the ecosystems are different. We work with entrepreneurs. We have a whole slew of governments. It was led by a government, Miami-Dade County. We have a huge number of nonprofits, ranging from community organizations to museums and organizations like the Reef Line and Griffin Catalyst, which is Ken Griffin's nonprofit. He was very supportive of us. He sees our vision and matches it. And then we have labor and workforce, capital, and a number of corporations, multiple Fortune 500 corporations. And we just had a meeting with Carrier. I don't know if they're going to join. They're definitely going to make a proposal for something that they could do with us. And this is why it's in South Florida, right? We have this history of being hit, particularly Andrew. After Andrew, we set the standard for building codes. We're going to do this for water and more, right? We want to set those standards, and we know how to do it, and we know it creates business. We are a global supply center. Our connections to Latin America and Europe are huge, and they're growing. And then we have this commitment to collaboration. We work with the Miccosukee. I'm really proud of that connection that we made. And the memberships of the leadership in the organizations represents the community. It's a very diverse community down there. And it's important that everybody's involved. Otherwise, you leave people out. That's been the history. And that doesn't go well. You don't maintain your support. So what are we doing? These are all of the technologies that we have, right? This whole variety of technologies. You can look at it. We're working on energy and building efficiency, which is with inside of buildings. That's a huge market, over 500 billion globally. We're working on coastal defense, particularly hybrid coastal defense. So how do you build in a way that attracts and builds with nature, where you can build in an ecosystem that actually makes your physical investment cheaper to maintain and stronger, providing extra protection? An example is if you put a hybrid coral reef or hybrid reef out that attracts coral, as the coral grows, it will continue to reduce the storm impacts while creating many, many additional benefits. But we know right now from very recent work that Florida's coastline receives $1 billion in annual protection benefits from the existing coral reefs, which are in peril. But those reefs, as they are right now, provide $1 billion a year in coastal protection. And that's just the reef part, right? Like, that's not the physical structure, it's the coral on it. And then the thing that we got funding for in particular is clean cement. And that is because we are made of concrete in South Florida. And that is a response to Andrew. In response to that, we built out of that material. And we have some of the greatest concrete and cement innovation labs in South Florida, but they haven't necessarily been commercializing there as fast as they could. And we're doing this, the way we're supporting this is through test beds and test bed services. And I will talk more about this, but there are existing things like the Wall of Wind at FIU that is a place where you can take your technology or your innovation, put it in front of their fans and get 150 mile an hour winds on it, right? Without having to wait for a hurricane. You can prove that it's going to work. And that is done all the time. It's made a whole industry. So these are the three verticals. Some details about what we're doing. And I can go into many more details about this when we do questions. I think that that's probably the best way to do it. There's a ton of technology. It's going to create a lot of jobs. It's going to reduce emissions, and it's going to reduce risk. That is the most important thing. And we have to do it in a way where it scales to affordability. And we can. You do these techno-economic analyses to see how expensive it is and how cheap it can get. And that's one of the support services that these companies need. And they need those analyses to be done correctly, often with backing from universities. So building those connections together is a critical component of what we're doing. Making sure that when there's a startup or even an incumbent business like Titan, they don't have all the scientists, or their scientists can't independently verify what they need verified, right? And so that is the connecting tissue that we're doing with the Tech Hub. And then we're also doing workforce development. And this is critical. We got $6 million for workforce over 5 years. And what that is doing is translating this technology into the community and making sure that it exists and sustains. Also, we often talk about workforce development as if it's just like giving jobs to people. That's not what's going on. We are giving people to companies. That's actually what's happening. you never have a job until a company needs to hire somebody. And the real challenge is for a company that has gotten funding or has gotten a contract and has a market opportunity to get the right people in there quickly enough to do that work. That is their challenge. They're looking. But the thing that they want to do most is, like, often if you're a small startup, you want to get this tech out there. You're so excited about it, right? And finding other people is a real challenge. And so we're doing that. One of the things that we're starting right in March is the Risk and Resilience Workforce Working Group. And it will have 25 companies to start from across the region who are hiring, particularly in the infrastructure space. And they will come together, and as they need jobs, they're going to be in real time connected to the certifications and to a pipeline of employees. And we can pay for wraparound services and certifications for people who, let's say you want to use clean cement, right? You need somebody at each checkpoint who knows how to use that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get it past inspections. It's not going to be safe. And this is the next generation concrete. This guy here in the hard hat in front, his name's Adirod. He's a professor at FIU. He's written grants that are worth $10 million or more at this point. He's pretty successful, well recognized, and he works in ultra high performance concrete with castings, 3D printings, and he invented a way to put it on with a spray. And ultra high performance concrete is essentially like the sports car of concrete. It's more expensive, but it's really high performance. It is thin and it's stronger. And part of what we're working on is ultra high performance concrete that is also environmentally friendly and can be applied efficiently. And this is a really great example. He figured out how to spray it on using existing technologies, which can decrease the cost of application dramatically, and it decreases waste even more. So this is just like a straight jump to affordability. And what we'll be doing is helping scale that by getting together a demonstration version that can be used in actual real world settings, right? So it's a trailer with a sprayer and some wraparound services. And then hopefully they will get a CEO who can like do that. They'll have the demonstrations and then they'll license it out. But this is like a total change for a scientist who has not started a company. And that's what we want to do. So here we go.
Great green infrastructure combines both natural and constructed systems, with the gray being concrete structures and the green being living things like corals, plants, and soil. The combination is used to reduce the impact of flooding and natural disasters. Gray infrastructure, including storm drains and pipes, will divert rainwater away from a city to the ocean or other bodies of water. But that runoff picks up pollutants like oil, fertilizer, and garbage along the way. Gray drainage systems also get overwhelmed, resulting in floods. On the other hand, green infrastructure such as marshes, reefs, and mangroves can soak up excess water, weaken wind and waves during storms, and absorb heat. Although it may require more space, planning, and costs, green infrastructure can offer better long-term results. For more information, visit our website.
So that is one of our partners, the Invading Seas. They have a number of videos. If you want more, go use them, share them. They are free. But this is part of what we're doing. We need to educate people quickly and simply. And that is an example. This is another one.
Hi, my name is Tim Sperry, founder and CEO at Carbon Limit. And Carbon Limit is a climate tech company where we create sustainable solutions for the built environment. What does that mean? It means we create more sustainable solutions to make things like concrete with less CO2, or something like concrete that'll capture CO2. Our CaptureCrete technology gives concrete the ability to reduce the carbon footprint of concrete at the point of manufacturing. And then once you make it into a road, a bridge, or a building, it actually gives it the ability to pull in and capture CO2 directly from the air. With Capturecrete and other sustainable solutions for concrete, we're seeing a whole new category of jobs being created in this industry, from sustainability managers, innovation managers, which are all actually trickling into the market down here in South Florida, where we're starting to license our technology and work with different cement and concrete producers.
So that's one of our startups. Tim started well before we started. I met Tim maybe 3 years ago. They were about 6 months to a year in. They've raised funds. They're doing really well. They have two products out right now. They have that Capturecrete, and then they have another one called Coolcrete, which it could be like the pavers or tiles out there. It reduces the temperature at the surface by up to 8 degrees. This is like really actually fantastic stuff. And it's worth it. People are buying it. And the thing that the Tech Hub is providing is something that they were already looking for, but hadn't had all the formal relationships and support, but is quality assurance and quality control. How much carbon are you sequestering when it's in a bridge? How much carbon are you sequestering when it's in a tile on the floor? How much carbon are you sequestering when it's a skate park, which is one of the things that we're building at the Underline with the concrete, right? Like, those are all actually different. The chemistry is different. If it's in the bay or in the Gulf, versus Biscayne Bay, the chemistry is different and the rate of carbon absorption is different, and it needs to be proven out. And that's something that we're able to provide some of the support for. And similarly, that is what is happening with the Coolcrete, right? These things need to be proven so that you can grow your customers and also attract additional investment, because you'll say, look, our total available market is massive, right? Who doesn't want a paver that will make it cooler in your yard? And we have a number of others. We're going to get at least 60 of these in the concrete space over the next 5 years. Now I'm going to pivot back as I wrap up here. You guys know what this is? These are mushrooms. They're amazing. And this is part of why we're here. These are mushrooms that are eating a tree. And that was not always the case. Wood was invented before fungus that could eat it. And that is why we have coal. We're not making any more coal because fungi are eating pretty much all of the wood before it can turn into fossilized carbon. And, that is really interesting to me, right? Like, this is this dynamic, and that is part of why we're here. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, that like, well, what is this connection? And this is going to get us back. Like, what is this positive vision, right? Things changed really big. There were I don't know how long it was, hundreds of millions of years where there was wood and there was nothing to eat it. It was this invention of plants that were I am so strong and sturdy, I'm never going away. And it was true for a long time. And then there was a fungi that figured it out, and it was super curious, and it was exploring and trying to do this stuff. And I think it's okay to personify a fungi, because they are these creatures that are very curious about the world and are making new chemicals and new processes all the time. They digest outside themselves. And so they can be putting this stuff out there. And then when it starts to work, they're amazing. I just unlocked this. They do it to rocks. They do it to everything. And they figured it out, and the world changed because dead trees were no longer smothering everything. It opened up all this stuff, and it put carbon around back into the cycle, and it balanced out the world. And I learned that from this guy, Merlin Sheldrake. It was in this book, which I think is definitely worth a read. And I think this is really important for a positive vision. We need to look outside ourselves, and we need to be curious. And that is exactly what entrepreneurs do, all of them. Every entrepreneur that I work with has a vision that I can't see. They're like, no, it's going to work like this. Oh my God. And then you talk to them and they tell you, and that is what's going on, right? And it's not just entrepreneurs, it's scientists. Merlin has a PhD. He is a fungi expert. And he is also like a creative guy who wrote a good book and is just passionate. And he's working with startups, he's working with communities on fungi, and he grew up knowing Paul Stamets, who is recognized a lot for his work with psychedelics, but actually is just an extraordinarily good entrepreneur who listened to fungi and was like, oh, they can do these things better than our chemical processes. We just put them out there. He did it. He captured it. He's made a lot of money. And I think you can see how passionate he is, right? And I think that's the thing that we need to tap into. What is your passion? What gets you so excited that people come around and you're just like, that. Look at it. And he told a great story. And I think it's really important. And this, do you guys know what this is? Anyone guess? It's lichen. Oh my God. Do you guys know what lichen is? Yeah, lichen's amazing. It's a fungi and it's usually a couple of algae, but it's almost always three things. Three distinct organisms working together. And it was super confusing. Fungi is the source of the term symbiosis. It was scientists studying these lichens that was like, what are they? What are they? They're not doing the things other things are doing. And they're like, oh, they thought it was a fungi and an algae that were working together. And recently, within the last 15 years for sure, they discovered that it's three things. And it's often three different things. And they're like, whoa, amazing, right? But they create an organism that is one of the most powerful on the planet. They're able to digest rock. They're able to survive on coasts. They're able to eat wood, but also all of the minerals that are on the wood that are being blown out of the ocean. And some of them can survive in space. There is some lichen that was in a space module that fell out of space and crash landed. And the lichen, they went and they like recovered the lichen, and it had like gone dormant. But within a couple of weeks, apparently, it was back. And I think that is what we need to do. You can't do it alone, and you probably can't do it just with one other partner, right? You need to do it with multiple partners. And I think like take a look at lichen. They're fascinating. These are the lichen behind my parents' house, and they're beautiful and really interesting. And then this is another thing. Look at artists. So we've got entrepreneurs, we have scientists, they're all curious, and then we have these artists. This is Lee Pivnik. Lee just got a great creative capital grant that is paying for him to create a living ecosystem inside a studio apartment in South Beach. So he's going to have fish, he's going to have trees, he's going to have fungi. He's already started it, honestly. He started it before he got the grant. But he got this grant, it's definitely happening. And Lee is one of my favorite artists right now because he's from South Florida and he's just like, I want to be able to live here. And I don't think the solutions that I've been given fully make sense. I don't think they're going to work well enough. And he's the first person that I ever did that he prompted me to make an AI image for the first time. He was like a few years ago, as part of this symbiotic house project, he was saying, what is this like house of the future in Miami going to look like? And so he had gotten one of these engines downloaded before ChatGPT was like publicly available. He was working with some scientists and he got access to it and was like, guys, send me prompts. And so I got to do a prompt. We put it on Instagram. Like, I think it's really great. And Lee is also a connector. He was very curious. And so he created a 10-part series with different scientists and experts and community leaders to say, like, what is this symbiotic house? Like, you call it a lichen house, right? What is this house that is alive at multiple stages, has multiple living things inside of it? And this inspires me. And I see the direct connection to entrepreneurship and to scientists, because none of these houses are getting built without an entrepreneur, right? Lee knows that. And none of them are being built without scientists. But I think let's include the artists as well. They really are an inspiration. And I'm going to end with this. This is Merv Tano. I met him last year on a federal advisory panel. I wish I had known him longer. He passed away this summer and had just like this great energy. But in the meetings, he was like, y'all, we're advising scientists on how to do climate adaptation. Like, what is the future of climate adaptation science at USGS? And Merv was like, science is power. And we all have power. And we're like, oh yeah, that's right. And he started talking about how you use your power. And he said something that clicked with me about how you motivate your power through your relationships with others. Right? How do you use your power? And in a way that's extremely generous. And in remembering him, one of my colleagues was like, oh yeah, I asked Merv where he got that from. I was like, that's some indigenous wisdom, right? It's like, and he's like, no, that's Foucault. That was Foucault. And you got like this is really real. And it's cross-cultural. And it is something that is exciting. And we're in this moment where I know we've talked a lot about like the doom and gloom of the future, but we're in a moment where the world is changing. The risks are rising. We now know where we're headed, right? I think there were a lot of questions about where we were going to go. For me, I now know that we're headed towards something that I think probably looks like 2 degrees of warming. And there's a lot that we can do with that as people who know that. We should inform ourselves, get excited, be curious, get out there, sniff around, and make some friends with scientists, entrepreneurs, artists, other folks in the community. And you're going to do like magical things. Thank you so much.
We're going to open the floor for questions. You have 2 mics circulating.
Thanks for your talk. Can you go back to the slide where you had businesses and various partners broken out by category? Because I wanted to double check something. Among the corporate world, I don't see insurance companies there or reinsurers, as well as food producers or real estate companies. And I wonder, is there resistance among, these are big industries in Florida, to joining this effort? And if there is, what can you do to overcome that?
I wouldn't look at this as who's missing, because we were very strategic about who was there to work on infrastructure. On the real estate side, yes, there is some resistance, but there's also some who want to be the best. Like, the greenest Apple store in the world, the most resilient Apple store in the world is in Miami right now. And there are some who really want that. I think the baseline standard, we can raise that. In terms of food, our ag systems are aware that the weather is changing. I think that I work with an ag manager. He knows, and his people know, and they're concerned. They said wind has changed, freeze points have changed. We know that that's stressing the plants. What do we do? Where is our opportunity? That's actually the question they're asking, and they ask IFAS all the time. So I think that, we're just not doing food, and that's part of the reason that that's not there. But I think they also have a big role to play in the zero waste efforts that we're working on. Hope is that good? Oh, sorry. And we'll go to the insurance companies. The insurance companies are not here because that was not the focus. The county, through work that I did with some partners, had an insurance summit last summer in anticipation of this hurricane season, being like, well, is it going to break? Because our rates have been going up so much. We pulled together about 70 people with very intentionally smaller group, invite only, insurers, community members, politicians, folks. We talked very seriously and came up with some good ideas that's publicly available. If you go to Insurance for Good and look at the Miami Insurance Summit, the summaries are there. It is challenging to get some of the insurance companies there, right? But the citizens came, and the state regulators came and they engaged very seriously. And they're looking for resilient solutions, right? They want to reduce risk. The industry gets this. We have to reduce the risk and prove that it's reduced. And that's where like the wall of wind and all that comes in. Like you need it proven, and then you need to prove that they're actually doing it in each building. Because if they just say they did and they didn't actually do it, then not going to give you a discount.
This is a little bit more of a straightforward question. You showed a map of your reach and sort of the climate tech industry's reach.
Mm-hmm.
So I live in Naples, which is right across the pond from you guys. Florida Gulf Coast University is nearby. We got hit by Hurricane Ian a couple
Good
years
job,
ago. I'm wondering, what are the barriers, if any, to expanding over into Southwest Florida, seeing as y'all are so close?
Okay, so this gets at what a national competition is. They defined the region. The first time around, we actually did this with NSF engines. We applied with Orlando, and we had this huge region. We were told, that is too big. Your region is bigger than lots of states. Some regions are states, but that's too big, essentially, right? And we're like, that doesn't seem you guys aren't actually all going to have the synergies that we need. And so we went with this region because this is a region that is well-defined, culturally connected, and economically connected in a way, not that we're not connected to Naples, but like it is actually a single region. And we've been doing climate planning for 15 years. So our story is really clear, right? I think everything that we do is going to bleed to Naples. You know, like our emergency response people go over there, people move to Naples, they move back. The businesses are absolutely expanding over there. I think there are two barriers. Though one is that regional piece, and that's why we didn't do it. And it's just a little too far away. It's not exactly the same metropolis. And then two, has been political pushback in the region. That's like, there's some rebuilding after Ian that didn't follow the rules. And they're like, well, just let us go. And that is costly for us. It's actually costly for us on insurance in Miami and Broward that our rates have gone up. And part of it's because, like, well, we don't know. Should we believe that you're going to follow the folks around you aren't doing that? And I think that tension has happened. Who knows with shifts in politics? Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go there and then we'll come to the front.
Sorry. I wanted to thank you for taking the time. I think this is an incredible presentation. My question is, as national policy is kind of shifting to a lesser focus on environmental issues, have you seen this impact any of the entrepreneurs that you're working on, given that they are so focused on like grant funding or other ways of funding?
I mean, it affects us. We don't know if we will have funding or not because uncertainty has been poured into this. We don't know what's going to happen. We certainly hope that the federal government honors the agreement that we have with them and we get the money that we've been spending, right? Like it's almost all through reimbursement. And so I would say all of that uncertainty is challenging for businesses because are they supposed to spend money? And also for the nonprofits and also for their customers, which are really the people, right? Like the best thing for these businesses is not federal grants. Like those are helpful. They get you started. But we are pounding into these startups. You grow through revenue. We're not growing through billions of dollars in speculative investment, right? It's revenue. Revenue from day one. And they're talking about this. As soon as we can get revenue, we're going to do it. And their customers, though, are folks who have been getting these grants, right? For advanced air conditioning, for coastal protection. The state has spent $1.5 billion on planning and coastal protection. And that's going to local governments who are doing real projects that have real contractors and real businesses. This is awesome, right? But if programs are put into question, and these include programs like there's a NOAA program for blue economy startups. That's awesome in Florida. It goes all the way across Florida. It's a great network. And they've put together an amazing coalition. It's called Continuum. And they have a grant. They've signed an agreement. And they just don't know if those fundings are going to be, if those dollars are going to be unlocked. I hope they will. But until that happens, everybody who has to pay their rent and has to pay their employees is probably going to hold off a bit. right? And that has a ripple effect. Do you want to?
So first, a quick comment, then one question. The comment is you just put the magical mushrooms, mystical molds gen ed class I took as an undergraduate in a different perspective for me. The question, so a couple weeks ago we had another speaker, Benji Back, who wrote a book called The Conservative Environmentalist. And he pointed out a tension that implicitly you're also pointing out, which is in the conversation around climate change, we have not just the doom and gloom scenario, but also, in his words, sort of an anti-capitalist scenario, but suggesting that the pursuit of innovation, often driven through a capitalist mindset, is also potentially part of the problem. And he's saying that's viewing things the wrong way. That innovation is the way forward to address many of the challenges of climate change. So I'm just trying to ask you to address that a little bit more explicitly rather than implicitly about this tension in discussions of climate between can we innovate our way through it and the implications on jobs, economy, and a capitalist society, et cetera, versus that other approach that has often been pretty prominent in public discourse around it, which is, to use your phrase, the doom and gloom side. We have to not, some might say it as a retreat approach as opposed to an innovation approach.
Yeah, and I don't, like, me personally, I have a degree in economics. We were talking before with students about this. I think that our economy is far more complex than capitalist versus anti-capitalist. And I do think that dichotomy that we have is unhelpful, and it's driven very much by capitalists as much as anyone else, who are saying the investment of capital with a set return is going to solve our problems. That's not true. We know it historically will not fix our issues. It is a key, super essential tool for us to fix those issues. It is really important, but it doesn't have all the answers. It doesn't. And it tends to overcorrect and go in weird holes, and it is intimately tied into the fossil fuel industry, which will eventually have to change. That is going to have to happen. And I think that we just need to be honest with that. And I don't think that capitalism has all the answers, and they should be more humble, right? And I think on the other side, anti-capitalism is a response to that, right? And it's a response to lack of power. And I think that I see entrepreneurs are not capitalists necessarily. They are people who are super curious, who have a solution and want to make money, right? They don't necessarily want to invest X amount of money and get it back. Actually, many entrepreneurs do not use venture capital, depending on what you're doing. And that's what we're talking about, growing through revenue. And yes, maybe we call the whole system, that's a market economy. That market economy is really important in this. And a well-regulated market economy is actually the most important thing for infrastructure, because we cannot be uncertain about the infrastructure. To go back to the insurance piece, if we have uncertainty about the building codes and how they are implemented, or about the concrete and how it is laid and put out there, then they will not insure it. And we can't spread and share that risk, which is like a capitalist thing. Absolutely. It's a capitalist tool, but it's not about having insurance companies. It's about having a building, right? It's about being able to build a bridge. Really complicated. You need the engineers, you need the insurers, but you need the standards that are going to come from the government. And they also, those standards, I think, should include benefits for community. We're trying really hard to get these living shorelines and more living stuff. And I could go on, but I think that maybe that answers it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming up here, and an amazing presentation. I had a few questions, but I'll try to limit them. You think about the building industry globally, and it's far and away the biggest contributor to emissions worldwide. And this is a very global problem, and interesting that South Florida becomes at the sort of forefront and epicenter of a global issue again. So I wanted to ask the degree to which you feel that Miami and the unique economy of Miami positions entrepreneurs you're working with to spread these advances and these kind of innovations to the global market.
That's a good question. I would just say that in Miami, transportation is the largest emitter on an annual basis. And the largest chunk of that is airplanes, because we have an amazing globally connected airport, the busiest international cargo airport in the country, which I think is part of it, right? Like, so here we go. Access to global supply chains. That is key, right? And it's key for like Miami. And when I say Miami, I mean the South Florida region. I don't just mean the city of Miami or Miami-Dade County. I mean Broward and Palm Beach and Monroe and over to Naples if people want to do that, right? Like, it is a very dynamic place that has a very high percentage of foreign-born people. And they have relationships in other countries. And a lot of them have come here escaping, traumatic events, economic events, physical events, political events, or just looking for economic opportunity. And that, I think, is actually the special sauce in South Florida. It's those people. And we have like a great port. We have good infrastructure that we're maintaining. But we have human capital that is connected all over the place. And then we're connected up here too. And I think it goes all across Florida. But I think that that's the main thing. And it's become this like great place for people to meet. They like to meet in Miami. It's a good spot. And that's kind of the vision. We can do that.
Great. And just as a follow-up question, I felt that the sprayable concrete was really amazing case study, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on some of the ways in which you were and the program were able to introduce greening elements into that.
Into the concrete
process.
Itself?
Or the sprayable concrete ultra high performance concrete you were
Well,
referring to.
and this is the interesting thing, right? I think a lot of this stuff is business model innovation. Maybe 70% plus is business model innovation, not tech innovation. The sprayable concrete, it's a business model innovation, not without changing the ultra high performance concrete, which it is changing and you can do things, but we can just say like, it's the same ultra high performance concrete. I don't remember the exact numbers, but you can reduce the labor cost by like something like 10x, right? So less people, which makes it cheaper. And you can put, that means you can put ultra high performance concrete in places that you could never do it before. And ultra high performance concrete, you need a fraction of the concrete. So and it has a higher performance, right? So if you're going to fix a bridge or build a bridge with that, and you can do it affordably, you're going to reduce your carbon impact and your materials impact drastically, right? And there are ways you can calculate it, but like that's the actual thing. And it's actually business innovation in some ways. I mean, it's a physical innovation, right? Like, okay, you're gonna spray it on. But the change is that you are going to disrupt somebody else's business model of like building much thicker bridges, because you can suddenly do this more elegant, lighter weight thing that performs as well as affordably. Does that make sense? Like that's where we're going to succeed. It's a great question.
You've mentioned building codes several times, and I would like to know your assessment of how the state is keeping up with building codes to provide the support for all these innovative things that you're doing.
I am not an expert in building codes. I will admit that, so I don't know the latest. But I know our experience in Miami-Dade is that we and a number of our community partners, private sector and public sector, advocated for stricter energy codes in the building code. We are just striving ahead with making our code strong and sturdy for high winds. And I think we've been increasing it locally for floods, right? So we raised our base flood elevation, and it's accounting for sea level rise now, which is a really great innovation. But I think at the state level, my understanding is that, and at the national and international level, we've been held back on energy innovation. And I think that's a big part of it. I think we could also include stretch codes and other kind of opportunities to be more, to have more innovation. One of the key things that I did not mention in here that we want to do is essentially regulatory sandboxes, right? So if we're like, well, I know that there's this standard, but what if when we rebuild an area, maybe that was hit by hurricane, right? You can imagine after Ian, if you said, you know what, we're going to rebuild it, but we're going to use these different codes, right? And we're going to use it for the next 2 years for rebuilding, and it might allow for something more flexible. I think that could be really interesting, and it is something that other places are trying. So I would encourage the state to do that. It's something that creates new business model opportunities, right? And lets us build more cheaply, especially, but with a higher safety factor. Because you can't do it with a lower safety factor. It will never pay off. One more. Then we're almost done, yeah.
Good evening. Dan Zhu, Chief Resiliency Officer for the City of Gainesville. So first of all, thank you so much for visiting us and also for the inspiring presentation. And Miami-Dade County and City of Gainesville have a long-standing collaboration. So thank you so much again, and looking forward to our continued collaboration towards a more sustainable and resilient future.
Thank you so much. And Dan and I were on a panel on Tuesday, right? So thank you for coming down to Miami. Is there time? Just one more. Yeah, just this last one. This will be, thank you all so much.
You were talking about South Florida as a whole, just not Miami-Dade, like Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach. So before we were talking about like the floodings that are happening in Broward, but they don't happen as frequently, at least in my radar, in Palm Beach and Miami-Dade. So like, how can these counties come together to solve issues that are happening in individual counties?
That is a good question, and there's a long answer. The question, I'm going to restate this question. You're in a region that doesn't have the same vulnerability everywhere. Some places it floods more when it rains. Some places it floods more when there's a storm surge. Some places don't flood that much. So how do you guys all get together and do something that's effective? I do think you should take a look at the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. They set unified sea level rise projections, something that the state has now adopted. Not the same ones, that are slightly different, but it's good that there's something we can all plan together with. The reality is, I'll be honest with you, we're not different and we're not separate, and we are working together. I went to the Broward Resilience meeting that was with the Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance yesterday morning. And yeah, we are different jurisdictions, but we are one community. And I think that is becoming increasingly clear. And the businesses actually are the ones that serve across it. There are very few. Our startups actually work all across the region, almost uniformly. And yeah, thank you all. I'm just going to close here really quickly with 3 book recommendations, because I like Ezra Klein's podcast. The first one is VB Biker, this is an academic. This is an academic book from the early 90s that I just love. And it taught me a lot about tech innovation, especially the story of bicycles. But it's the story of bicycles, Bakelites, and bulbs, and like light bulbs, and essentially like first plastics and stuff. It's fascinating, and it's an idea about how innovation happens, and hint, it happens collectively. It doesn't happen on your own, even if you are doing it on your own. Number 2, Merchants of Doubt. We talked about this one. I think knowing the history and the context is super important. I honestly think we're passing this point. It's not about doubt anymore. We all know it's here, but it's really helpful to know how we got where we are. And then this is my friend Anna. She just published this book called Core Samples. She is a geologist who also worked for Senator Franken and then the governor of Minnesota, leading his water work. And she wrote these stories about being a mom through all that and being a scientist. And it's really nice. It's really good. I think you guys will enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Treuer, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I think one thing that I'm gonna take with me tonight is that we
find power through our relationships. I think that's something that's really powerful just to hold on to as we navigate our way through this world. Thank you all for coming out. Feel free to visit our table in the back to learn more about the Graham Center and Gulf Scholars.